The emergency alarm screamed through the command center of Earth's Defense Station Aurora. Commander Min Jun Park dropped his coffee and rushed to the main screen. The transmission was weak, full of static, but the terror in the alien voice was clear. This is Elder Scientist Yoon So-jin of the Zilani colony on Kepler 442b. Our world is under attack. Massive ships have entered our system. We have no weapons, no military. They are destroying everything. Please, if anyone receives this message, we need help. The transmission cut to static. Minjun stared at the screen, his heart pounding. The Zilani were peaceful farmers and scientists. They grew food for half the galaxy and studied plants that could survive on any world. They had never hurt anyone in their long history. "Sir, we're getting visual data from long-range sensors," reported Lieutenant Sarah Chen. "Multiple Korthak battlecruisers have surrounded the planet." Minjun's blood ran cold. The Korthak Empire was known throughout the galaxy as brutal conquerors. They enslaved entire species and forced them to work in dangerous mines. Any race that refused to submit was completely destroyed. "How long would it take us to reach Kepler 442b?" Minjun asked. 3 days at maximum burn, sir, but we only have 5 ships available. The Korthak have at least 20 vessels in that system. Minjun looked around the command center. Every face showed the same thought. This was impossible. Earth had only joined the galactic community 2 years ago. They were still considered a minor power with limited influence. "Get me a direct line to Earth Defense Council," Minjun ordered. Within minutes, the faces of the 5 council members appeared on screen. Admiral Rebecca Torres, the council leader, looked tired. "Commander Park, we've seen the transmission. The situation is unfortunate, but we cannot risk our fleet for a doomed cause. Admiral, with respect, the Zilani are our allies. They shared their agricultural technology with us freely. Half our colonies eat food grown with Zilani methods. They are trade partners, not formal allies," Admiral Torres replied. "We have no treaty obligation to defend them." Minjun felt anger rising in his chest. "Since when do we only help people because of paperwork? These are innocent farmers being slaughtered." 1. Council member David Kim shook his head. "Commander, be realistic. 5 ships cannot defeat 20 Korthak cruisers. We would be sending our people to die for nothing. Maybe we cannot win a direct fight," Minjun said. "But we have to try. What kind of species would we be if we abandoned people who need our help?" The council members looked at each other. Admiral Torres sighed. "Commander, the Korthak will expect any rescue force to arrive in 3 or 4 days. They will have complete control of the planet by then. Then we leave now and arrive in 3 days," Minjun said firmly. "Maybe we can save some of the Zilani. Maybe we can make the Korthak pay a price for their cruelty." Admiral Torres was quiet for a long moment. "You really believe this is the right thing to do?" "I know it is," Minjun replied without hesitation. "Earth has always stood up for those who cannot protect themselves. That should not change just because we are now in space." Another council member, Maria Santos, spoke up. "If we authorize this mission, you understand it will likely be a one-way trip?" Minjun nodded. "I understand. But some things are more important than personal safety." Admiral Torres looked at her fellow council members. One by one, they nodded. "Very well, Commander. You have authorization for an immediate rescue mission. Take the destroyers Seoul, Tokyo, Berlin, Cairo, and Nairobi." Godspeed. As the communication ended, Minjun turned to his crew. "You heard the Admiral. Prepare for immediate departure. Send word to all ship captains. We launch in 2 hours." Lieutenant Chen looked worried. "Sir, what is our strategy against 20 Korthak ships?" Minjun smiled grimly. "We do what humans do best, Lieutenant. We improvise." Meanwhile, on the surface of Kepler 442b, Elder scientist Yoon Seo-jin led her people through the massive underground route networks beneath their capital city. The Zilani had built their civilization around the planet's giant trees, using the natural tunnel systems as transportation and storage. "How many people do we have in the emergency shelters?" Seo-jin asked her assistant, a young Zilani named Keth. "About 12,000 in the main network, another 8,000 scattered in smaller shelters across the continent." Explosions echoed from above as Korthak's ships destroyed the surface buildings. The beautiful gardens that had taken centuries to grow were being burned to ash. "Elder Seo-jin," Keth said quietly, "do you think anyone received our message?" Seo-jin looked at the young Zilani's frightened face. Around them, families huddled together in the dim light of the root chambers. Children cried softly, while their parents tried to comfort them. "I do not know," Seo-jin answered honestly. "We are far from the main trade routes. Most species would not risk their ships to help us. Then we will die down here?" Seo-jin touched Keth's shoulder gently. "We will survive as long as we can. Our people have lived through ice ages and meteor strikes. We do not give up easily." Above them, Warlord Scarex of the Korthak Empire stood on the bridge of his flagship. Through the windows, he could see the burning cities of the Zilani world. His officers reported complete orbital control. "Resistance is minimal, my lord," his second-in-command reported. "The Zilani have no military weapons at all. They are hiding in underground tunnels like frightened animals." Scarex nodded with satisfaction. "Excellent. Begin mining operations in the northern continent. These plant growers will make good workers in the deep mines. Their small size will be useful in tight spaces. What about their botanical research? Some of our scientists believe their plant knowledge could be valuable." Scarex laughed coldly. "Plants are food, nothing more. Destroy their laboratories. We have no use for their weak sciences." As night fell on Kepler 442b, the Korthaks settled into their victory. They posted minimal guards, confident that no help would come for the defeated Zilani. In the underground shelters, Seo-jin gathered the other elders. "We must prepare for slavery," she said sadly. "Tomorrow they will come for us." But deep in space, 5 human ships burned through the darkness toward Kepler 442b, their crews preparing for the impossible. 3 days later, space around Kepler 442b rippled like water as 5 human ships dropped out of hyperspace. The sudden appearance caught the Korthak fleet completely off guard. On the bridge of the destroyer Seoul, Commander Min-jun Park studied the tactical display. 20 Korthak ships surrounded the planet in a loose formation. They had positioned themselves like they owned the system, with no expectation of attack. "They are not even running proper patrols," reported Lieutenant Chen with surprise. "Their sensors are focused on the planet, not on incoming threats." "Good," Min-jun said. "Captain Lee, are your people ready?" On the screen, Captain Lee Da-eun of the destroyer Tokyo nodded. "Drop pods are loaded. My Marines are ready to deploy the moment we break through their orbital screen. Remember everyone," Min-jun announced to all ship captains. "We are not here to win a space battle. We are here to save the Zilani. Every second we keep the Korthak busy up here is time for civilians to reach safety." The Korthak fleet scrambled to respond as the human ships spread out in a wide formation. Warlord Scarex could not believe what he was seeing. 5 tiny ships against his massive fleet? "What species is foolish enough to attempt this?" he demanded. "Scans indicate they are human ships, my lord," his tactical officer reported. "A recently contacted species from the Rim territories." Scarex laughed with genuine amusement. "Humans? I have heard of them. They are supposed to be weak traders and diplomats. This will be over quickly." But as the battle began, Scarex quickly realized these were not ordinary traders. The human ships moved like nothing he had ever seen. They used the planet's gravity to slingshot around moons, appearing from impossible angles. When his heavy cruisers fired their main weapons, The human destroyers simply were not where the targeting computers expected them to be. Captain Lee Da-un pushed her ship into a tight spiral around one of the planet's moons. The maneuver would have killed any Korthak crew from the crushing forces, but humans had trained for high-gravity combat. "Target their communication array," she ordered. "If we can blind their coordination, they cannot use their numbers advantage." The Tokyo's weapons tore through a Korthak cruiser's sensor array. Immediately, the enemy formation began to lose cohesion, as ships could no longer coordinate properly. On the surface, elder scientist Yoon Seo-jin felt the ground shake as something massive hit the planet. Through the root network, she could hear explosions coming from all directions. "The Korthak are bombing us," Keth cried in terror. But Seo-jin listened more carefully. The explosions had a different rhythm than Korthak weapons. They came in clusters, scattered across the continent. "No," she said slowly. "Something else is happening." Above ground, metal pods the size of small buildings crashed into the forest around the Zelani cities. Each pod split open like a flower, revealing human soldiers in advanced armor. But these soldiers did not act like any military force the galaxy had seen. Sergeant Kim Tae-hyun emerged from his pod and immediately began setting up a medical station. Around him, his squad unpacked emergency food supplies, water purification systems, and communication equipment. "First priority is civilian contact," he announced to his team. "Second priority is medical aid. Combat is third priority unless we are directly attacked." Within minutes, the humans had established a perimeter around the largest Zelani city. But instead of defensive positions, they created aid stations and set up loudspeakers broadcasting messages in the Zelani language. "People of Kepler 442b, this is the Earth Defense Corps. We are here to help. Please come to our aid stations if you need medical attention or food. We will protect you." Deep in the root network, Seo-jin heard the broadcasts. She could hardly believe what she was hearing. "They are asking if we need help," she whispered. Keth looked confused. "Should we trust them? We do not know these humans." Keth looked confused. "Should we trust them? We do not know these humans." Seo-jin thought about the gentle voices on the broadcast. There was no demand for surrender. No threat of punishment. Only offers of help. "We have nothing left to lose," she decided. "Bring the injured children. We will test their intentions." When Seo-jin emerged from the underground tunnels with a group of wounded Zelani children, she found something that amazed her. The humans had set up a complete field hospital in the middle of the forest. Their medics were already treating injured Zelani who had been hurt in the bombing. A young human woman approached them. "Elder, I am Medic Joyce Park. Please, bring the children here. We have supplies that can help them." Seo-jin watched in wonder as the human medics worked with gentle hands to treat the injured Zelani. They spoke softly to frightened children and shared their own food with hungry families. "Why are you helping us?" Seo-jin asked Medic Park. The young woman looked surprised by the question. "Because you need help," she said simply. "That is what people do for each other." Meanwhile, Sergeant Kim was learning about the planet from a Zelani botanist named Elder Hesh. "Your root networks cover the entire continent?" he asked. "Yes, they connect all our cities. We use them for transportation and communication." Kim's eyes lit up with tactical possibilities. Could human soldiers move through these tunnels? Elder Hesh nodded. "Easily. But why would you want to hide underground?" Kim smiled. "Not to hide. To appear exactly where the enemy does not expect us." As the first day of human presence ended, the Korthak ground forces were completely confused. They had expected to fight a traditional battle against fixed positions. Instead, they faced an enemy that could appear anywhere on the battlefield within minutes, deliver medical aid to civilians, and then vanish underground before the Korthak could respond. In the underground shelters, Zelani families who had expected to die were now eating human ration packs and listening to human medics explain how their injuries would heal. Children who had been crying in terror were now playing simple games with soldiers who spoke broken Zilani but communicated perfectly through smiles and shared toys. Elder Seojin found herself sitting next to Sergeant Kim as they planned the next day's operations. "I do not understand your people," she said. "You traveled across space to help strangers. You risk your lives for us. Why?" Kim looked at the Zilani children sleeping peacefully under human blankets. "Because this is what we do," he said. "We take care of each other. All of us." Above them, the space battle continued as human ships led the Korthak fleet in a deadly dance around the planet. But on the surface, something new was happening. Two species that had never met before were becoming allies, united by the simple human belief that everyone deserves protection and help when they need it most. On the second day of fighting, Sergeant Kim Tae-hyun sat in the root chamber laboratory with Elder Hesh, studying samples of local plants under portable human scanners. Around them, Zilani scientists worked alongside human technicians, sharing knowledge that neither species had possessed alone. "This blue moss releases chemicals when it feels danger," Elder Hesh explained. "We use it to warn us when storms approach." Kim studied the scanner readings. "The chemical signature shows toxicity to reptilian nervous systems. Could we grow barriers of this moss?" Elder Hesh's eyes widened with understanding. "Yes. The moss grows very fast when given proper nutrients. We could create living walls in hours." While they worked, reports came in from around the continent. The Korthak ground forces were becoming frustrated with human tactics. Every time they attacked a position, the humans simply disappeared through the underground network and appeared somewhere else. Captain Lee Da-eun's voice crackled through the communication system from orbit. "Ground teams, we are seeing massive Korthak reinforcements moving toward the capital city. At least 5,000 troops." "Understood," Kim replied. "We have about 400 Marines scattered across 6 aid stations. Are we evacuating?" "Negative. Command believes we can hold them with our new botanical allies." Kim looked at Elder Hesh, who nodded firmly. "The plants of this world have protected my people for thousands of years. Now they will protect yours too." What happened next amazed even the human commanders. Within 3 hours, the Zilani had grown natural fortifications around every human position. Dense walls of blue moss created toxic barriers that the Korthak could not cross. Fast-growing vines reinforced human defensive positions and provided natural camouflage. But the real surprise came when the Korthak attacked. As their forces approached the first human position, the moss barriers released their chemical defense. The Korthak soldiers began feeling sick and confused. Their coordination broke down as the alien chemicals affected their nervous systems. "This is impossible," Warlord Skarek screamed at his tactical officer. "Plants cannot be weapons. The humans are using the planet itself against us, my lord. Our troops report that the very ground seems to fight them." Meanwhile, in the human aid stations, something beautiful was happening. Zilani children were teaching human soldiers how to encourage plant growth with simple songs. Human medics were learning that many Zilani injuries could be treated with local flowers that had healing properties. Elder Seojin found herself working directly with medic Joyce Park to treat both human and Zilani wounded. "Your people adapt so quickly," she observed. "Yesterday, you knew nothing about our medicine. Today, you use our healing plants like you were born here." Joyce smiled as she prepared a bandage made from woven grass fibers that helped wounds heal faster. "Humans are good at learning from others. We believe everyone has something valuable to teach." The real test came when the Korthak launched their major assault on the capital city. 5,000 warriors attacked the human positions in a coordinated strike, expecting to overwhelm the small human force through sheer numbers. What they found instead was something that challenged everything they understood about warfare. The humans did not try to match force with force. Instead, they turned the battle into a rescue operation. As Korthak troops advanced, human soldiers appeared through the route network behind enemy lines. But instead of attacking the Korthak directly, They began evacuating Zelani civilians from areas that were about to become battlefields. The Zelani, guided by human instructions, moved through their underground networks faster than the Korthak could track. Sergeant Kim coordinated the evacuation from the central aid station. Team 3. We have 50 Zelani families trapped in the Eastern District. Team 7. There are injured civilians in the botanical gardens. The Korthak found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed more interested in saving lives than taking them. When Korthak forces captured abandoned human positions, they found nothing but empty aid stations and medical supplies. "Where are they?" Scarix demanded. "They must be somewhere." The answer came when the Korthak tried to pursue the humans underground. The route networks that had seemed like simple tunnels became a three-dimensional battlefield that the Korthak could not understand. Humans could move vertically through the route systems, appearing above or below enemy forces at will. But the Korthak's greatest shock came when they encountered the new biodefenses. Entire sections of forest had been converted into toxic barriers that made their soldiers sick. Plants seemed to move and grow to block their advance routes. "Sir," a Korthak officer reported to Scarix, "our forces are reporting that trees are actively growing to block our vehicle movements. The forest itself appears to be fighting us." Scarix could not believe what he was hearing. Plants are not intelligent. They cannot coordinate attacks. But they could, when guided by Zelani botanists working with human tactical coordinators. Elder Hesh had spent hours teaching human soldiers which plants responded to specific nutrients and how to encourage rapid growth in desired directions. As the day wore on, the Korthak assault began to fall apart. Their soldiers were becoming sick from plant toxins. Their vehicles were trapped by rapidly growing barriers, and their enemy continued to disappear and reappear like ghosts. Worse, their own troops were beginning to question the mission. Korthak soldiers had been trained to fight warriors, not medics, who spent their time saving civilian lives. Some younger Korthak began to wonder why they were fighting people who seemed more interested in helping others than conquering territory. "My lord," the communications officer reported nervously, "we are receiving reports that human medics are treating wounded Korthak soldiers with the same care they give to their own people." Scarix stared at the officer. "What did you say?" "Human medical teams are providing aid to our wounded. They are not interrogating them or harming them. They are simply healing their injuries and releasing them." For the first time in his military career, Warlord Scarix was completely confused. This was not how wars were supposed to work. Enemies were supposed to hate each other, not heal each other's wounds. As night fell on the third day, the Korthak forces found themselves no closer to victory than when they had started. Meanwhile, the human-Zelani alliance had grown stronger with each passing hour. They had learned to combine human adaptability with Zelani plant knowledge, creating a defense system that the Korthak simply could not overcome. In the underground shelters, Zelani families shared their evening meals with human soldiers. Children who had never seen other species were now playing games that combined human rules with Zelani traditions. Elder Seojin looked around the shelter and realized something had changed. Her people were no longer refugees hiding from destruction. They had become part of something larger, a community that included beings from another world who had come to help simply because it was the right thing to do. By the fourth day, Warlord Scarix was losing patience. His ground forces had failed to capture a single major Zelani city, and the human fleet continued to dance around his ships in orbit like annoying insects. "Prepare the orbital bombardment cannons," he ordered. "We will burn this entire planet to ash. If we cannot have these slaves, then no one can have them." His second-in-command looked worried. "My lord, orbital bombardment will destroy the botanical resources. The Empire specifically wanted those preserved." "The Empire wanted easy slaves," Scarix snarled. "These plants and their human protectors have made that impossible. We will teach the galaxy what happens when someone defies the Korthak Empire." In space, Commander Minjun Park received the warning from his long-range sensors. "Sir, the Korthak ships are powering up their bombardment weapons. They intend to glass the planet. Min Jun felt cold anger rise in his chest. The Korthak were going to murder millions of innocent people, simply because they could not win a fair fight. Signal all ships. We are ending this now. What happened next would be studied in military academies for generations. The human fleet, which had been avoiding direct confrontation for 4 days, suddenly revealed the true extent of their capabilities. Captain Lee Da-un had been using the planet's asteroid belt to hide additional ships and weapons platforms. While the Korthak focused on the 5 visible destroyers, the humans had been building a trap using the system's natural resources. All hidden units, execute plan, falling sky, Min Jun commanded. Suddenly, the space around Kepler 442b filled with human weapons. Asteroids that had seemed like natural objects revealed themselves to be mobile platforms. Ships that had been hiding behind moons emerged with full weapon systems charged. But the most shocking revelation was the human battle strategy. Instead of trying to destroy the Korthak fleet, they targeted specific systems with surgical precision. Communication arrays failed across the enemy fleet. Weapons systems went offline. Engine controls stopped responding. What are they doing? Scarex demanded as his flagship shuddered under precise strikes that disabled systems without destroying the ship. They are crippling us, my lord, but not killing us. His tactical officer reported with amazement. Every strike targets non-essential systems or areas without crew. Within an hour, the mighty Korthak fleet found itself completely helpless. Their ships could still fly, but they could not communicate, fight, or coordinate their movements. The humans had turned 20 warships into 20 floating pieces of junk. On the ground, the final engagement began when Sergeant Kim received word that the orbital bombardment threat had ended. All teams, the fleet is secure. Begin Operation Garden Shield. What followed amazed even the Zelani. Human and Zelani forces emerged from the underground networks simultaneously across the entire continent. But instead of attacking the confused Korthak ground forces, they began surrounding them with living barriers. Using their combined knowledge, they had learned to grow specific plants at incredible speed. Within hours, every Korthak position found itself enclosed by walls of dense vegetation. The barriers were not harmful. They simply prevented movement and slowly released calming plant chemicals into the air. Surrender your weapons and you will not be harmed, human loudspeakers announced in the Korthak language. We offer medical treatment for your wounded and safe passage off this world. Many younger Korthak soldiers, already confused by 4 days of fighting an enemy that healed their wounds, began to lay down their weapons. They had never encountered an enemy that offered mercy instead of death. Warlord Scarex found himself trapped in his command post by a wall of blue moss that made his officers feel sick and confused. Through the organic barrier, he could hear human voices offering medical aid to his wounded soldiers. "This is not how wars end," he shouted at the walls. "Enemies are supposed to die." But Elder Seojin walked through a gap in the moss wall, accompanied by Sergeant Kim and 2 human medics. "Warlord Scarex," she said calmly, "your war is over. Will you accept our offer of peaceful surrender?" Scarex stared at the small, gentle Zelani scientist who should have been his slave. Behind her stood the human soldier who had turned his military campaign into a disaster. "You should hate me," he said. "I came here to destroy your world." "Yes," Seojin agreed. "You did. But hate will not heal the damage that has been done. Only cooperation can do that." Sergeant Kim stepped forward. "Warlord, your soldiers are being treated well. Your wounded are receiving medical care. Your ships are disabled but intact. This can end with honor for everyone." For the first time in his military career, Scarex felt completely out of his depth. These people had defeated him utterly, yet they offered him dignity in defeat. "What do you want from me?" "We want you to think," Elder Seojin said simply. "You came here to take slaves to work in mines. But what if there was a better way? What if your people's engineering skills could be used to build instead of destroy? Scarex laughed bitterly. The Korthak Empire does not build. We conquer. Then maybe it is time for the Korthak Empire to learn something new, Kim suggested. Your people are strong and skilled. Imagine what you could accomplish if you worked with others instead of enslaving them. As they spoke, reports came in from across the continent. Korthak soldiers were surrendering in large numbers, many of them confused by the gentle treatment they received from their captors. Human medics worked alongside Zelani healers to treat wounded from both sides. But the most important report came from orbit. Captain Lee Da-un announced that several Korthak ship captains were requesting permission to speak with human commanders. The younger officers wanted to understand how such a small force had defeated them so completely. My lord. A young Korthak officer entered Scarex's command post. Captain Varex, of the cruiser Bloodfang, requests permission to meet with the human fleet commander. He says he has questions about their tactics. Scarex looked at his officer with surprise. Questions? About what? About cooperation, my lord. He wants to understand how the humans and Zelani learned to fight together so effectively in just 4 days. Elder Seojin smiled gently. Perhaps that is where peace begins. Warlord. With questions instead of conquest. As the sun set on the 4th day of the battle for Kepler 442b, the impossible had happened. A massive invasion fleet had been completely defeated without a single ship being destroyed. Thousands of soldiers had surrendered without massive casualties on either side. But most importantly, the first seeds of a new kind of galactic relationship had been planted. Young Korthak officers were beginning to ask questions about cooperation instead of conquest. Zelani scientists were sharing their knowledge freely with former enemies, and human soldiers continued to demonstrate that the greatest victory was not defeating your enemies, but turning them into allies. The war for Kepler 442b was ending, but something much larger was beginning. 6 months later, the transformation of Kepler 442b was visible even from orbit. What had once been a simple agricultural world was now the site of the galaxy's most ambitious cooperative project. Commander Minjun Park stood in the observation deck of the new orbital station, watching construction teams work below. Korthak engineers directed massive earth-moving equipment, while Zelani botanists guided the growth of new forest cities. Human coordinators managed the integration of technologies that no single species could have developed alone. It still amazes me, said Elder Seojin as she joined him at the window. 6 months ago, we were hiding in root tunnels, waiting to die. Now we are building something that has never existed before. Below them, the first tri-species city was taking shape. Korthak engineering had created massive biodomes that could maintain perfect growing conditions. Zelani agricultural science had developed plants that could thrive in the artificial environments. Human organizational skills had turned the chaos of 3 different species into a coordinated community. The council is requesting a full report, Minjun said. They want to understand how this happened. Seojin laughed softly. How do you explain that sometimes the best victories come from refusing to fight? The real story was happening in the construction sites and laboratories below. Young Korthak engineers were learning that building was more challenging and satisfying than destroying. Zelani scientists were discovering that their plant knowledge could solve problems they had never imagined. Human settlers were finding that cooperation created possibilities that none of them had dreamed of alone. Captain Varex, the young Korthak officer who had first asked questions about cooperation, now served as the chief liaison between Korthak workers and the human Zelani alliance. He had traded his military uniform for engineer's clothing and spent his days designing new types of growing facilities. Commander Park, Varex reported as he entered the observation deck, the latest biodome is ahead of schedule. The Zelani botanists say they can have the first crops growing within 2 weeks. And your people? Minjun asked. Are they adjusting to civilian work? Varex smiled. better than I expected. Many of my former soldiers say, this is the first time they have built something that will last. Military conquest is temporary, but these gardens will feed people for generations. The transformation was not without challenges. Warlord Scarex had refused all offers to join the project and had been sent back to the Korthak Empire with his most loyal followers. But nearly 40% of his forces had chosen to remain on Kepler 442b as civilian workers. More importantly, word of the project was spreading throughout the galaxy. Other worlds facing Korthak invasion had sent observers to see how the impossible peace had been achieved. Some younger Korthak colonies were questioning whether constant warfare was truly the only path for their species. The real test comes today, Seojin said. The first harvest festival will show whether we have built a community or just a work project. As evening approached, the mixed population of Kepler 442b gathered in the central plaza of the new city. Humans had contributed organizational skills and cooking techniques from dozens of worlds. Zelani had grown special ceremonial flowers that bloomed only once per year. Korthak engineers had built a sound system that could handle music from 3 different species. What happened next would have seemed impossible 6 months earlier. Korthak workers shared tables with Zelani families who had once hidden from them in underground tunnels. Human children played games with young Korthak, who had been raised as warriors, but were now learning to be builders. Sergeant Kim, now serving as the community's security coordinator, watched the celebration with satisfaction. Medic Park, do you remember what you said when we first landed? That this is what people do for each other? Joyce Park, now the director of the Joint Medical Center, smiled as she watched a Korthak engineer teaching human children how to build simple machines, while Zelani youngsters showed them which plants could be used as natural tools. I think we proved that right, she said. But this is bigger than just helping each other. This is creating something completely new. Elder Hesh, the botanist who had first taught humans about the planet's plant life, approached the stage with a special presentation. 6 months ago, we planted a tree, he announced. A earth oak, modified with Zelani techniques to grow in our soil. Tonight, we can see how it has grown. The tree was magnificent. It stood 30 feet tall with branches that formed natural platforms where all 3 species could gather. Its roots had integrated with the local plant network, making it part of the planet's natural communication system. Its trunk was strong enough to support Korthak-designed platforms, while its leaves provided perfect shade for Zelani gardens. This tree represents what we have accomplished, Elder Seojin told the crowd. 3 species, each contributing their strengths, creating something that none of us could have built alone. But the greatest surprise came when Captain Varek stepped forward with an announcement that no one had expected. I have received communication from my home world, he said. The Korthak High Council has been watching our project. They are curious. They want to send a diplomatic mission to learn about our methods. The crowd was silent for a moment. Then Elder Seojin began to laugh. Do you mean that the mighty Korthak Empire wants to learn about cooperation? Varix grinned. Not all of them. But some of the younger council members are asking questions. They want to know how we increased productivity and worker satisfaction while reducing conflict and resource waste. Commander Min-jun stepped forward. And what did you tell them? I told them that we discovered something the Empire never taught us, Varix replied. Building is harder than destroying, but the results last longer and make everyone stronger. As the festival continued into the night, the 3 species celebrated their first successful harvest together. Children who had been born after the invasion played games that mixed traditions from Earth, the Zelani homeworld, and Korthak colonies. Adults shared stories and songs that were gradually creating a new culture unique to Kepler 442b. But perhaps the most important moment came when a small group gathered around the hybrid tree. Commander Minjun, Elder Seojin, and Captain Varex each planted a new sapling, representing the first generation of trees that would grow up in the tri-species community. What do we call ourselves? asked a young Zelani girl who had been born in the underground tunnels, but was now growing up in the integrated city. Elder Seojin looked at the mixed crowd of humans, Zelani, and former Korthak soldiers. "I think we are simply neighbors," she said. "People who chose to help each other instead of fight each other." As the celebration ended, reports were already spreading across the galaxy. The impossible had become reality on Kepler 442b. Three species that should have been enemies had become the foundation of something entirely new. Other worlds facing invasion were sending requests for human assistance. But they were not asking for military support. They wanted to learn the diplomatic and organizational methods that had turned a war into a community. Elder Seojin stood under the hybrid tree as the crowds dispersed, looking up at stars that no longer seemed frightening but full of possibilities. 6 months ago, she had sent a desperate message into space, hoping someone would hear their cry for help. What had arrived was more than rescue. Humanity had brought something the galaxy had never seen before: the ability to transform enemies into allies and conflicts into opportunities for growth. The tree's leaves rustled in the evening breeze, and Seojin smiled. Tomorrow, there would be new challenges, new problems to solve, new relationships to build. But tonight, for the first time in months, she felt something she had almost forgotten: hope for the future.